If you're a parent, teacher, or school leader, and you're sick and tired of the frustration, anger, and unfair treatment of children at high risk in our public schools, then perhaps it's time for all of us to do something about it. In this podcast, Dr. Almitra Berry brings you tips, tools, strategies, and tactics to build successful solutions while touching, moving, and inspiring all of us to transform our schools so that every child thrives. Here's your host, Dr. Berry.
Hey there, Equity Warriors. Today, I welcome a new guest, Mr. Eugene Williams, to the 3E podcast. As an author, educator, speaker, and a former child actor, which he will tell you about, Eugene brings us a wealth of life experiences and practical wisdom. His common sense insights are designed to improve your life, expand your intellect, and empower you to achieve success in school, work, and beyond. So stay tuned with us today for an engaging conversation that promises to both inspire and enlighten. Thank you for joining me today, Eugene.
Thank you for having me, Doctor. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you as well. It is a lovely summer day today. But I want us to start with a pivotal moment in your life, something that has shaped who you are today, how it influenced the work that you do. Set us up for our conversation today.
Pivotal moment in my life. Well, as you mentioned in the introduction, I am a former child actor, and I was blessed with the opportunity to be on stage, screen, TV, soap operas. I've worked with actors like Bill Cosby, Pearl Bailey, just the list goes on and on. Stephanie Mills, Ossie Davis, the list goes on and on. It's been a very interesting youth for me. But around the age of 14, because I've been acting from the ages of, I guess, about 4 to 14. Around the ages of 14, I decided, I think I'm a little tired of the rat race. I want to do something different. I want to be a normal kid again, if you will. And both my parents, the late Dr. Eugene Williams Sr. and the late Helen B. Williams, were educators. And I saw the great things that they were doing with their students and the way they were uplifting people and changing lives. Even as a young person, I could see that through their efforts and what they were doing. So I said, well, maybe it's in my blood. Maybe that's what I should start gearing myself towards. And that's when I decided that, even though I was still young and had a lot of options in front of me, I said, teaching wouldn't be such a bad thing. I think I might be good at that.
I had a similar conversation with myself. Not that I felt like I needed to get out of the rat race when I was, still a child, but having a parent as an educator. And even though I often share, I had no desire to become a teacher. My mother was an educator. I understood what was involved, and that just wasn't for me. That once that happened, once I had that conversation with myself and entered a classroom and fell in love with being in that environment and working with young people and providing opportunity through education, it became more of a calling and something that I felt like I could dedicate my life to in a good way. So it's a good thing. Our parents sometimes have more of an influence on us than we would like to believe they could have.
Oh, no doubt.
And certainly would. And when we're young, probably more than we want them to have.
Yes.
Yeah.
The older I become, the more I find I'm just like them. And my daughter will point it out. My daughter's 26, and she'll tell me, "Gosh, you sound like Jean and Grandma Helen." So,
well, the one thing I say is my mother is now still blessed to be with us at 87 years old. I lost my father when I was a child, and many times I'll think, I'm saying that like my mother says it, but I have also promised my adult children, I will never be like your grandmother in a few ways, in the things that are driving me crazy as part of that sandwich generation, right? And still caring for an aging parent. And although my nest is empty, those babies are still babies until, until they're old, old. But let's stay on that topic of parents. As an administrator, I know you've had observations and the whole working with, engaging with parents.
Working, engaging, and dealing in some cases. Okay. Yes, let's keep it 100. Sometimes you are dealing with parents.
Yeah, I you know what? And you're right, because I think of me as a parent advocate for my child. I'm sure there were a few times when they felt like they were dealing with me as I was dealing with them. Sure. But we tend to be much more actively involved in our children's schools when they are at the elementary, at the K-5 level. And
Absolutely.
that tends to fall off as they get to middle school, and even more so in high school, when kids are saying, I don't need you around me anymore. Don't hug me in public, mom,
Right.
those things. But I know, and you can share with us, what are some things that, one, how important is it for parents to remain involved with school? And then what are some things that parents can do to help support their students, their child's academic achievements as they get to those middle and high school years?
Well, speaking from two viewpoints, speaking as a former principal who was my daughter's assistant principal in middle school. So at that point, I was a parent and an administrator.
Yeah.
And then, knowing the importance of parent involvement, I will say this: a lot of parents make the mistake of thinking that once junior reaches high school, that we don't have any work to do. I maintain that high school is when you have the most work to do, because at that point, of course, you want to get the foundation straight in elementary school, and you want to take them through those changes like puberty and social emotional changes in middle school. But in high school, that's the last step before you get out there in the real world and start hunting with the big dogs, if you will. And so you really need to pay attention to what your child's doing in class, the type of information he or she is getting, who their teachers are, what their motivations are, and what the school is willing to do along with you in terms of in concert with you to put your child in a position to win, whether it be the world of work after graduation or for your institution after graduation. So yeah, that's the time to be the most involved, I would say. The first thing I would say to parents is, number one, remember the phone goes both ways. Do not be that parent who at the end of the quarter says, well, nobody called me. Nobody told me Johnny was, yes, ma'am, I understand that. And if the school did not follow through with notifications, with interim reports, with report cards, that is on them. But I will say to parents also, I've said to parents before, the phone works both ways. If Johnny comes to you every night and tells you he has no homework and nothing to do, ask questions, because Johnny might not be telling you the truth. We love Johnny. Johnny's our baby. But our children will lie to us and give us an opportunity.
We need to stop picking on Johnny. I say that to myself all the time.
Okay.
Poor
Johnny.
Okay. I remember when I was in teachers college, my ed psych professor said we tend to overuse boys whose names start with J when we're talking about disciplinary issues. That was, and I remembered that. He also said there actually had been some research, and that disproportionately boys whose first names start with J are disciplinary issues. So, I don't know if that's a cart horse thing, if we are set up to believe that it's boys whose names start with J. But I had a student one year when I was teaching U.S. history, so 11th grade social studies, and I had a student whose name, and not a black boy, it was a white kid whose name was Dustin. And Dustin was the thorn in my side all year long. And at some point in time, I said, did your parents ever consider naming you Justin instead of Dustin? Because I was certain there was supposed to be a J in that child's first name somewhere.
Maybe his middle name started with a J. Who knows?
I did not ask.
Yes.
Yeah, parental support, so key all the way through. And, one of the things that I think, and you tell me as an administrator, that we sort of miss is that so many of our parents who are not having the phone work from their direction to the school to ask questions, to be engaged, are formerly children who already had failure in our public school system, right? So we're looking at a second or a third or a fourth generation that as part of our system, we did not prepare them for the world. And yet we're asking them to do something that they're not prepared for. So that, I think that we as educators and our schools as systems, and especially if they want to be a little more community oriented, need to do some educating of the parents and caregivers of their children and make that information accessible, not just, having offerings during the school day when they might be working, but recognizing they may work 2 or 3 jobs, to keep food on the table. So how do we meet them where they are to help them support us in educating their child?
I can tell you one of the ways that we use, and I'm a former principal. I finished my last year of principalship in 2023 after 27 years in public education. But
God bless you.
Yeah, hey, look, it was a blessing for 27
It
years.
was.
10 years in the classroom, 17 years as a building leader. But what I will say now is that one of the things we have to do as administrators, or the current crop of administrators need to start doing, is really use the technology. One of the things I loved, parents might not want to come to a meeting, but every parent had Twitter. Every parent had Facebook. Every parent had, a lot of parents had TikTok, the younger they got. And so when you put those messages on your website or on the social media, and you constantly give them updates about the day and when specific dates are and when certain meetings are and when certain things are happening in the school system, you find that a lot of times the parents know without you having made those calls. Of course, I don't mind robocalls as well, let people know certain things, let the whole, the parent family, if you will, the parents in our school systems know the different things that are going on in the school. But we have to start meeting people where they are. We have to start also having meetings when parents are available. Do not have a 3:00 meeting when parents don't get off till after 6. Like, stop doing that. Okay. As a principal and as a building leader, there will be nights, and many of them already know this, but there will be nights when you'll be staying very, very late, not necessarily because you want to, but because you have to meet the needs of the people who you are serving. You are a servant leader first and foremost. And I think those things are very important.
Hey there, Equity Warriors. I want to take a quick moment to share something exciting with you. You know how passionate I am about equity in education, right? Well, I've created a special space, a safe space, where we can dive even deeper into these crucial topics. It's our Patreon channel, and I'd love for you to join me there. Here's why it's so awesome. As a Patreon subscriber, you'll get access to exclusive content that I will not share anywhere else. I'm talking additional insights, workshops like you would get in regular professional learning sessions, resources that can really amplify your impact in education. But it's more than just extra content. By subscribing, you are directly supporting our mission. You're helping to create more valuable discussions and resources that you've come to love. You're part of the change we're making in educational systems. And let me tell you, our Patreon community, it is something special. It's a place where passionate educators and advocates can come together, share ideas, and drive real change. So if you're ready to take your commitment to educational equity to the next level, I'd be thrilled to have you join me. Just head over to patreon.com/3E podcast. That's patreon.com/3E podcast. Remember, your support means the world to me, and it helps me continue this important work. Together, we can create the educational system all our students deserve. Thanks for considering, and now let's get back to the episode. Yeah, servant leadership is key. You said something about the robocalls. I'm going to share what I did as a child and something that recently happened to me with more and more kids having cell phones. Now, when I was a kid, I was working at McDonald's when I was 15 because I wanted my own money. My mom was a single parent. There was no way on earth I was getting any sort of financial allocation out of my mother's wallet when I was able-bodied and could work. So at 15, I was working at McDonald's. And one of the things I remember asking my mom was if I could have my own phone, not a house phone that I could extend into my room. I wanted my own phone number. And she said, you pay for it with your money, you can have your own phone. So I saved and for context, especially if there are some young people listening to this, minimum wage when I was 15 was $3.10 an hour.
Tell them about it. Let them know.
And that was after we got a raise from $285, and I lived in California, which had one of the highest minimum wages. So I wasn't making a whole lot of money, but I did save my money up, and I got my own telephone with my own phone number. So when I filled out that form at school about the home phone number so they could call, and the system then was they always called second period. If you were not in your second period class, they called home to see if you were sick. That was rolling to my phone number when I cut second period. And yes, that's the confession also that I did cut second period fairly routinely after I had my own phone. But I was still a straight A student. I still graduated number 3 in my high school class, and it was not because it was non-competitive. I knew how to do my work and turn it in. I just didn't feel like sitting through class the whole time.
Sure.
But in the last, about a couple of months ago, I started getting a robocall from a school system locally. And I'm like, why am I getting a robocall? Well, some creative child had used a false number, which happened to be my phone number, for the school to robocall. And I was getting a call every single day for weeks on end about this child not being in attendance. So parents, caregivers, double check with your school system and make sure it is your phone number that is listed in the office.
Please.
But I think too about social media, and even, they have phones, they've got phone numbers, almost everybody has a cell phone of some form or another. Mm-hmm. But to have TikTok and Instagram, and I hate X because I think it's an unhealthy environment. But if our parents are there, that Facebook, whatever social media platform, all social media platforms, and send out those messages that way. I have seen some amazing TikTok videos from groups of teachers that are telling their parents, caregivers, and students about getting ready to come back to school. Yes. If that's how we can reach them, let's do it that way. Why not?
We have to meet kids where they are. We have to meet parents where they are. And you have a tool at your disposal now that can be used for evil or used for good. So when you get a chance to use it for good, use it to death. Use it for good.
Yeah. Yeah. I always said I would never do TikTok, but, oddly enough, when it comes to my social media audience, TikTok, along with LinkedIn, are my two biggest platforms. And I was very surprised to find the level of engagement that I get on TikTok, because I'm thinking, who's looking at it? And then I realize we've got millennial and Gen Z teachers that is what they have grown up with. So that is how I can reach that group. It's old dogs like me that are still looking at Facebook. Right. So
like I say, you look at it all, because you have in certain, systems or in certain districts, you have a wide variety of, parent ages. So, there's sometimes grandma's raising Johnny. And so you got to use Facebook. And then sometimes, the student's mom might be, less than 20 years older than the student themselves. Yeah. So you got to use the other social media platforms. Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. I had a 6th grade student, I'll never forget, whose mom was 14 years older than him.
Right.
So, recognizing that we have some very young parents that are out there. And while we are unfortunately in this political space where women being able to care for their own bodies is being challenged, we are looking at, in another maybe 15 years, 14, 13 years, having a lot of very young parents who are not prepared for caring for and just barely finishing, they'd be in middle school at 13, 14 years old. Right. That they have a child that you are working with. And staying on social engagement just for a minute, and how we reach our parents and meet them, recognizing that our parents are speaking multiple languages other than English as well. Yes. And I know you have a relationship with foreign language you might want to share with us.
Well, I can tell you this. I was a Latin teacher for a time when I was teaching in the classroom. And one of the things I would always tell my students is, learn this Romance language, because if you want the key to Spanish, you want the key to French, you want the key to Italian, Latin has got it. It's the root language of all of those things. But when I was an assistant principal years ago in Spotsylvania County, Virginia, one of my colleagues and I created a group, or created an organization called TEAL, because our colors were teal and black. And the organization was TEAL, Teaming in Education and Learning. And the goal of that was to reach out to Spanish-speaking parents at their churches, in their businesses, what have you, and help them to understand the type of things we wanted to do with their children. Because a lot of times in certain cultures, the teachers are never questioned. It's just, I delivered my child to you, and I trust you, Mr. Williams, and you are the teacher, you are the boss, you will handle it. And I always thought that was, it was great for us as teachers in terms of the cooperation with the parents, but I also thought it's kind of unfair to Spanish-speaking parents, or parents who don't speak English fluently, because we want them to play an active role and to advocate for their own kids and to understand what's going on with their children. So we created a program where we would go to these churches and go to these local businesses, and we would do our whole presentation in Spanish. And then we would do the same presentation again in English. So I had to work on, had to glean back from my years growing up in Miami, Florida, there was a huge, a Cuban element there. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to also use my Google Translate and then translate all the presentation documents into Spanish while I'm talking to the
Mm-hmm.
parents. And it was just a wonderful experience because we got a chance to know each other. They got a chance to laugh at me and my mispronunciation, and they could correct me. But in doing that, we reached a new level of understanding with them and a relationship with them that I think served their kids well. And so whenever you have an opportunity, not only to talk to parents, but talk to parents from disenfranchised communities, marginalized communities,
Mm-hmm.
parents who don't speak English as their first language, you got to do that because that's what America is now. That's what's being brought into our schools.
Yeah. Yeah. And in some instances, there are so many languages, not just English and Spanish.
Right.
Coming from California, we had a number of Southeast Asian languages and Asian languages.
Sure.
You have the Eastern European languages in some parts of the country where that's prevalent.
Right.
Middle Eastern languages. During Reading First, I worked with Detroit Public Schools, and all of the schools I was assigned to work with were schools where the kids were coming from Iraq. So it wasn't a language I was familiar with, but one of the things, and you said it, is to understand culturally what those parents' expectations and understandings and relationships are with schools, because it is true that in many countries, teachers are revered. The school is a place that is revered, almost the way we revere medicine, and maybe a little bit more than we do here. And so for a parent to hand over their child to you is all that they can do, because it is their understanding that you have that expertise, the knowledge that they should not question. So we have to actually provide some development and learning to our parent and caregiver community that here in this country, it is not offensive to us for you to question us. We want you to question us. We want to teach you how to advocate for your child. And that's so important. And when we have especially children who may be the translators for their family, it is an unfair burden on that child to, and if you've got some that are a little mischievous, they may mistranslate and you'll never know. But things like, I've got my phone that I use in my own personal transferring my life, so to speak, or immigrating to the Dominican Republic, where my Spanish is okay, but is not perfect. And certainly situationally depends, where I can turn that on. You can do a two-way conversation with that translator. You just keep speaking English. It'll translate to Spanish. It'll listen to that other person speaking in Spanish or whatever language and translate that to you for English. So the excuses have been removed.
Yeah. Right? And the best thing about Google, I loved Google Translate when I used it. The best thing about it was all those same posts I made on social media in English.
Yeah.
I had those same posts on social media in other languages.
Yep.
And so everybody got a chance to see what was going on. And very few people had questions that way.
Yeah. Foreign language, world languages and respecting world languages, as well as the multiple Englishes that our children come to school with is so important. And I think I discussed with you the book that I'm working on right now on sociocultural Englishes, but making and having educators understand that we can do so much more, like you said, with Latin. By the way, I did take high school Latin for 3 years. I was the only student in third year Latin. Me too. Yeah, it is great for our vocabulary, for comprehension, but so is every other language. If our children are multilingual,
right,
the last thing we should do is be trying to squelch that and instead bridge that, use that language that they come to school with, because it's good for their reading, it's good for their writing skills, comprehension skills, and math skills a lot of times.
Vocabulary.
Huge.
One of the things I told parents, I said, listen, I know some of you don't see the importance of foreign languages, okay? But I tell you, whether it's Latin or any other Romance languages, I'm telling you, your child's vocabulary can be advanced. If your child knows that the French word for window is la fenêtre, and they see a word saying defenestrate, and they know that the prefix de is out of or away from, then they know that if somebody defenestrates themselves, they jump out the window. I said, these are things. I said, and SATs are coming up. We have a test in Virginia called the SOLs. Your vocabulary needs to be broad. You need to be able to look at words you haven't seen before and be able to decipher them and figure them out just from roots and derivatives and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And foreign
Mm-hmm.
language plays an excellent role in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't need to wait until, middle school to teach world languages to children.
No.
And like I said, as long as we continue to support and really respect and value the language that kids come to school with, there is, I don't usually plug programs, but you reminded me, there is a program called Spelling Through Morphographs. I used it as a 6th grade teacher because it teaches roots and affixes and how you can combine words and how you can break words apart based on the different morphographs that are in that word.
Right.
Morphographic spelling is really one of the best ways our kids can learn how to spell and understand the meaning of words at the same time. Just huge. And then when my daughter, who was the gifted child, scary gifted child, everything was just always easy for her. And when it came time to prep for the SAT, she came home one day and she said, "Mom, they said there's all this stuff on Greek and Latin roots on the SAT." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "They never taught us any of that." And so I pulled out my old teacher guide from my Spelling Through Morphographs program. And I said, "You're going to teach yourself this." And I said, "I'm not going to teach it to you. You're smart enough." And I handed it to her. And, she did amazingly well on that vocabulary portion on the SAT because she very quickly built that knowledge of all of those affixes and how to break words apart, something that we should be doing for every single child.
One of the things I told my foreign language teachers to do, like I kind of demanded, I didn't demand a lot of things out of my teachers, but I demanded this one thing. I said, a part of your instruction should also be English derivatives. It's okay to learn this language. We want them to learn other languages. But if there's any way that you can use these activities to help broaden their vocabulary in terms of their native language, do it. Because it's only going to help in the long run with their writing and their reading and their comprehension. It's only going to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. My personal wish has always been that every single child in America, because it's common in pretty much every other part of the world, but that every single child in America would be immersed in 2 languages from the time they enter kindergarten.
Yes. That's part of the old American pride that we have, and we don't engage in those things as much as other nations do, unfortunately. So.
And I wonder why, not really say that with a lot of cynicism, because if you go to a more affluent private school in the United States, you're going to get those 2 languages, right?
Yes.
You may even get 3.
Yeah.
If you are fortunate enough and wealthy enough to go to an elite boarding school, you are most definitely going to be educated in multiple languages.
You're going to get them. I can tell you from personal experience as a student who went to private school. Shout out to McDonough School in Baltimore and Ransom Everglades School in Miami, Florida, Coconut Grove. They put the students there in excellent positions to achieve and advance, especially on the SAT, the verbal section, because of the languages we were taught from middle school all the way through up until graduation. And so I would tell parents out there, advocate for those things that happen in your public school systems, because the kids that your students are competing against potentially are getting those pieces of knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. So critical. You spent some time in schools that had different demographics.
Yes.
I put it that way. All white schools or predominantly white schools, as well as schools that were predominantly of color. And so I want to ask you, as a Black man yourself,
yes, ma'am.
We know from just the basic numbers that our Black male students are impacted disproportionately in a number of ways. Yeah. And sort of culturally within their own peer groups more than anything else receive this message that they should not be the high achiever in the schools.
Yes.
So what can educators do to increase the enrollment of Black male students in advanced courses, honors, AP? How do they combat that more local and peer group influence to not be the high achieving students?
Well, I can tell you a couple of things that I've done and a couple of things I want to tell parents and Black educators to do. First thing, stop allowing Black students, boys and girls, men and women, stop allowing Black students to think that intelligence is inherently a white thing. Stop that.
Amen.
Stop that. And when you hear that rhetoric from them, nip that in the bud right away. And make sure that you then educate them in terms of the contributions that intelligent, genius Black men and women have made to the success of this country. That's the first thing. See, a lot of schools would probably have more African American students in these classes if these students knew where they came from, the stock that they came from. And we don't do a good job as a nation. We do a better job than we used to, but we don't do as good a job as we should in terms of teaching that. One of the blessings I had when I worked at Riverbend High School in Fredericksburg, Virginia, I was not only an English teacher, but my principal, God bless him, allowed me to teach a course called African American Studies. He said, Mr. Williams, combine the history with the literature. It's your course. Do whatever you want. Assign whatever books you want to. Run them by me first, because if it's too wild, I had to say something about it. He said, but short of that, he said, do your thing. And so as a young teacher, I was blessed with the freedom to do that. And a lot of kids, once they learned about themselves, once they learned about the great heroes that contributed to American history, they began to see themselves in a different light. And so, one of my favorite lessons as an English teacher back when I was teaching American literature, I would compare and contrast Patrick Henry's speech in the Virginia Convention to Malcolm X's By Any Means Necessary.
Oh.
And have the kids write a compare and contrast essay about that. And they began to see, I've heard that, even the white students, I heard that this guy, Malcolm X, was a rabble rouser and a communist and a this and a that. But actually, he and the founding fathers were talking the same mess.
That's okay. Right.
So those type of things. But secondly, I have to tell you, when I was working in Orange County Public Schools in Orange, Virginia, it was a predominantly white rural system in this particular case. I was working with 3 other African-American male educators. And we put together a program with the help of Dr. Gilman Whiting and Dr. Donna Ford of Vanderbilt University, called the Academic Scholars Institute, where we would work with kids every summer, a select group of African-American males, those kids who did well in their regular classes, but for whatever reason were not being referred by their teachers to enroll in the advanced classes, or chose not to because they thought it was a white thing. And we got together with them every summer in a 4-week camp, and we exposed them to college professors. We exposed them to college life. We exposed them to Black business leaders and Black professionals, and we gave them the constructs of a scholar and what it means to be an African-American scholar. And we talked about the history of the images that were put in front of them that made them believe that they could not achieve what white folks could achieve. And we saw the growth happening. And it was several years we did this program, and they're still doing this program to this day. And I was so excited because even after I left that system to take on another job, I found out that one of the kids that was a product of that system ended up getting a full scholarship athletically and academically to Harvard University.
Wow.
As a wrestler. And about 90% of the young men that we worked with all went to some institution, 4-year institution for college, and were accepted. And many of them received scholarships. And so it was just that they just needed somebody to tell them how great they were. And it's not that their white teachers weren't telling them that. It's just that the investment was different. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And so when they see their Black English teacher or their Black male assistant principal telling them, this is what you can do, this is where you can go, and you have examples in front of you, all around you that maybe you didn't know about, but let's go to places and talk to people who are these people that I'm talking about. So it's not something strange to you. And you begin to see that there are a lot of African Americans, a lot of people who look like you, who are doing great things educationally, politically, scientifically, that you never hear about. And so it's my job as a teacher not only to teach you about reading and writing and arithmetic, but to expose you to people who are great, who look like you.
Yeah, absolutely. There is nothing more empowering than to see, representation.
Yeah.
I have this thing I call the 4 equity indicators, and one of those is that representation aspect, to see in your books, in your classroom, in the novels you study, the literature that you study, in every aspect, even in the sciences, because we tend to get overlooked, our contributions to the science community and engineering. Yes. But to see people, and this is for every child of every color and ethnicity, to see themselves in that content, to see the contributions of their people to America, if I'm talking to a U.S. audience, and most of the time I am.
Yes.
But that fuels a belief that I can do these things, as opposed to what we tend to find in books that are not equitably crafted. I'll put it that way.
That is eloquent. You did that one. I'm you did that.
Thank you. But that there is a white saviorism mentality. And so even in the sciences, the natural sciences, the exemplars that you see will be about white men who are saving communities of color, white men who've made these contributions, ignoring that Black and brown bodies created it before, or the materials that they needed have to come from Black and brown communities. All of these things are important. And when our children do not see that, their belief becomes, you can only do this if you are white, and a lot of times white and male. And so that sort of overly misogynistic experience, I was trying not to, I'm trying to keep it. Yeah, no, but yeah, that's what it is.
We have a certain age now. It is what it is. Let's just call it.
It is what it is. It is what it is. It's called misogyny. And this idea that only men can do this and only white men can do this. And if this is what our children are hearing from the time they get into school, what else are they supposed to believe?
But what amazed me is the fact that I feel like sometimes as a culture, and I have to be very careful how I say this, that we're going backwards in terms of the parenting influence and the knowledge and the passing on of knowledge to the generations of our particular contributions to America and our particular greatness. I was always shocked when I was teaching a number of Black kids in this country who did not know about Charles Drew, who did not know about Benjamin Banneker, who the only time they saw Frederick Douglass was, during Black History Month. Who did not know about James Baldwin. I mean, these are people that are not, these aren't ancient folks. These are modern references.
And I tell you, if there is one author that every single child should read, Black, white, brown, whatever, before they leave high school, they should be reading some James Baldwin. And if you put that connected to modern American history, right?
There's no comparison for what he brings. I remember I could tell teachers, I said, you haven't lived until you are teaching an English class, predominantly white English class with maybe 3 or 4 African-American children in it. And you are teaching them Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston as one of the novels for your English class. That is an eye-opening experience, because at that point, the kids see themselves and the white children see, oh, I know that character, or that reminds me of somebody that my daddy and granddad used to talk about that lived in town. And you begin to see the commonalities and the humanity of folks that you're not normally, shown that humanity with regards to. So I just think it's so important for us to make sure that in predominantly Black, inner city, urban, whatever you want to call it, areas, that we are exposing our children to this. But it's also equally important that in predominantly white schools, where we have a small concentration of Black students, we're showing them this, because sometimes you can get so ensconced in the other culture that you forget about your own.
Yeah. I did, gosh, it's bothering me now. If it was, I build a lot of content, and so sometimes I can't remember, was this a blog post? Was this a white paper I did for a publishing company? Whatever it was, it might have been something. Actually, I think it's in my book that is in production right now. But there are a lot of books by authors of color, and harder, one of the challenges I find is finding those books from lesser represented cultures and ethnicities.
Sure.
finding literature from the wide variety of Central and South American authors that
Yes.
are written in English or translated to English for their children of Central and South American ethnicity to read. Finding Asian authors, a little bit easier, but understanding that if you have a population of children who are Vietnamese, giving them a book written by someone who is Chinese is not the same thing, right? Because that is not their culture. That just because they are globally Asian does not mean that Chinese relates to a Vietnamese experience. And we need to be.
It's almost an insult in some
It
way.
really is. It really is. And if we are not more cognizant of who our children are,
Right.
really
Right.
who they are,
Right.
we are not properly addressing their needs.
Yes.
It's just as simple as that. I also, what you said about Black History Month, right? We always get on Black History Month.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always say is, look, when you're doing Black History Month, stop teaching I Have a Dream. Pick up, if you want Martin Luther King, give me a letter from a Birmingham jail.
Hey, but that's the people want the
They will
parts
feel good.
and the portions of the kings and the exes of the world that make them comfortable.
Right.
They don't want they don't want to
Right.
hear about when Dr. King talked about, I fear I'm integrating my people into a burning house. That's wait, but all of that.
No. We can't do that. We can't do that.
But all of that is part of American history. One of the things that's really crazy, and I know you probably deal with these questions too. I would have parents, kind of sideways ask me, "Are you teaching CRT over at that school?"
Yeah.
And I would say, "No, ma'am. We're teaching history,
Yes.
warts and all."
And all.
And
Yes.
if the actual history is too much to take, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
But history is what it is, and we can't run away from it just because it's not comfortable for us.
Yeah.
So,
Well, not comfortable for some, and
Right.
some who completely
Right.
negate the fact that the history they want taught is not comfortable for some of us.
well, not only is it comfortable though, it's dismissive.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it's as if our contributions did not exist,
Yeah.
or these things
Yeah.
did not happen to people who look like us or our ancestors. So, yeah, we gotta be honest about these things, man.
Teaching hard history is hard,
It is
right?
It
But
is.
it's absolutely critical. And I think one of the things, I'm sorry.
No, it
Were you
is.
gonna say? Oh,
I
okay.
was.
Just sort of connecting, or a link in that is, it's impossible to do that if you do not have a healthy school environment, right?
Absolutely. You got to be
Safe to
blessed.
teach and safe to learn.
You got to be blessed with administration and teachers who get it. In my career, I was blessed with several administrators who got it. I had to deal with some who didn't, but overall, I had those are the ones I worked with. And when I was an administrator, I tried to be that same administrator, the one who gets it. And so it's also very interesting the conversations that sometimes an African American administrator will find himself having, especially in a predominantly white rural space. And you find yourself not only working with parents, but also educating them at the same time. And some, depending on how it was presented to them, were receptive, and others, it was a chore. But you don't let that stop you from doing it anyway, hoping for the best.
How do you, or what are some strategies that administrators can use to shift that culture in their schools? Do you have one or two for us?
Well, one of the things that we can do, number one, is what we've been talking about. Make sure that in your English classes, the curriculum is representative of a wide variety of different ethnicities and cultures. And that way you're exposing the children to that. You also want to make sure that even in your celebrations, I know people talk about, well, we have too many celebrations now. There's this month and that month and the other month. No. When
Every month is somebody's month. Just plan on it. Get a calendar.
And that's cool.
Yeah.
This is our country. Why can't we all have a month or a set of weeks or a celebration
Yeah.
of some sort, as long as we are not doing anything to hurt another group or to denigrate another group? So, take advantage of those things. There's Black history, there's Hispanic history, there's Women's Month. Every time you have one, I would say, have some sort of speaker come in, have some sort of spirit week, if you will, whatever you want to do about it. Have something, have art projects related to that month. Do something where kids can take an active and participating role in cultures and experiences that are foreign to them and that are not their own. It helps to bridge the gap between cultures and hopefully help us be a better society in terms of working with one another and understanding the greatness that each of us bring to the table and become a better country, because of it. I would also say, like I said, continue administrators and teachers to have open lines of communication with people whose languages are different from yours and whose ethnicities and racial situations are different than yours. Continue to have opportunities for folks to come together. One of the things I loved was homecoming weekend as a principal, because we had the big football game and everybody was together, and we had a chance to show the entire district that, people from a wide variety of backgrounds and socioeconomic circumstances can work together for positive goals. And so sports is also a very big role in that. People underestimate the role of sports. I know that we cast it off as unserious sometimes, and everybody's not going to be an athlete, and I get all that. As a former high school athlete and a former high school football coach, I get all that. But these things bring community, and so we have to continue to push those things forward. The arts, concerts,
Huge.
Have your cultural nights where all the different cultures are represented, all the different foreign language classes and all the different cultures are represented with either food or presentations or performances. These are all things you can do.
Yeah. I don't want to forget, you have a book. We didn't talk about your book. Tell us about it.
I have a few books.
Yes, you do.
The first one I do. The first one I'm going to share with you is a book that my father and I wrote some years back called It's a Reading Thing, Help Your Child Understand. Now, those of us who are African American, back in the 90s and late 80s, we remember us saying, man, it's a Black thing. You would understand. Mm-hmm. Well, it's more than a Black thing. It's a reading thing. And reading is the great equalizer. One of the things that amazed me, and I Googled this, I suspected this, but when I Googled it to confirm it, it even bothered me more. I mean, almost 50% of our American public, regardless of age, regardless of race, are reading the 6th grade level or lower.
Yes. Yeah,
now
we are a functionally illiterate nation.
That's crazy to me, and it doesn't have to be that way, because one of the things we talk about in the book is the reading thing is the importance. Number one, parents, read to your kids. Read to them when they're in the womb. Read to them when they're toddlers. Those I Can Read books that where the wild things are. That's educational material. Read that. I would also suggest that, and it's a trick that I used to use, and parents used to laugh at me. When you're watching TV, the closed caption for the hearing impaired.
Put the closed captions on.
Put that on, because the kids are reading the text while they're seeing the words out of the actor's mouth, and they're listening, and they're associating that together. You've got to do that. Another thing I would suggest is number 3. As your kids get older, it's good to have them read a variety of materials, everything from comic books to graphic novels to novels. But also, don't run away from the classics, because a lot of those classics have strong vocabulary in them that can be used for those standardized tests. And when I would teach the classics, a lot of my students would say, why are we learning this? And I would say, you know what? If for nothing else, this gives you some Jeopardy knowledge. Who knows? You might be on Jeopardy one day, and Dr. Beck might ask you about the Raven and who said nevermore. And you might be the one to remember Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes.
Sometimes it's good to know. Or you might be traveling in circles with this cocktail conversation. And they're going to judge whether or not they want to do business with you by the level of your cocktail conversation. You got to look like you know something if somebody wants to put money in your pocket. Okay.
That's right.
All these things are very, very important. Break it down to the kids in ways they can understand. So that was the first book. Another book my father and I wrote was a book called Grounded in the Word. Grounded in the Word, a guide to mastering standardized test vocabulary and biblical comprehension. Did you know that back in the old days, I would say the old days of the 90s and 2000s, and even now, several hundreds of the words that were found in the verbal portion of the SAT are also in the Bible. So
and we know our Bible.
And we know our Bible. Okay. So our goal was to, hey, let's learn the word while learning some more words. The words in the word. And so that ties in to the churches, the Sunday schools. Church is a big part of our culture. That ties into those groups, gets the pastors involved, gets the deacons involved, gets the church mothers involved with the kids are learning. Very, very important. Wrote a novel called I Am the Darker Brother some years ago. This is loosely a fictional account, which is loosely based on my experiences as a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity at Emory University back in the late 80s and early 90s. And the other book is Reflections of a Confused Middle-Class Black Youth. So you have me, the son of Dr. Eugene Williams Sr. and Mrs. Helen B. Williams, who are educators and administrators and first generation college students in their family. And they have the 3-bedroom home in the suburbs, and they're raising this young Black child actor, and he's going to a predominantly white private school. At the same time, he's ensconced in his own culture because of his relatives and his parents and his grandparents. And his father is giving him a comic book called Golden Legacy, where he's learning about Toussaint Louverture and Matthew Henson and all these great. And so you're taking all these things, all this Black experience in the midst of predominantly white culture. That's a lot for a young man or young woman to navigate and go through. So I wrote a collection of short stories, poems, novels, original, about that experience. So those are the things that I'm about. I'm about trying to educate folks, all folks, but especially my folks, first and foremost. Because if I can't educate me, then I can't educate you. But at the same time, I'm also showing our commonalities and giving everybody an opportunity to see what the other side goes through. I don't want to get political too much, but I wanted to say something real quick.
Go ahead.
You know, we are, as educators, we constantly are in a struggle right now with the right and the left and the blue and the red in terms of where they want to take education. And I had the pleasure of working with some liberal teachers. I had the pleasure of working with some slightly more conservative teachers, you know. And one of the things that has been amazing to me is my liberal teachers get very angry and don't understand, how can these parents say these things? How can they support this man? How can they? And I say to them, because some of them are young, a lot of them are younger than I was. I say to them, you have to understand something about this country. When you grew up in a country as a white person, and every commercial, every television show, every piece of history tells you how brilliant you are and how the world is your oyster and you can do anything because you're an American. And you turn back around 20, 30 years later and you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you're on welfare, or you don't have access to certain things that you think you should have because you were told, if I just worked hard, I would get this. And then you happen to see people of other colors and other races advancing and achieving and doing the things that you were told only you should be able to do.
That's right.
And then a man comes along and tells you and tickles your eardrum with things that you want to hear to make you feel good about yourself. That's that phenomenon. Don't be surprised by that. Don't be surprised by that. Don't even be angered by that. Understand that.
Yes.
And when you understand
know where it comes
where
from.
that comes from, then you can start combating that.
Yes.
But you have to understand where it comes from first. And you can't talk to him in an accusatory tone or talk down to him. That ain't gonna help.
No. And it really is just, if you consider it the mirror what has been the Black and brown and indigenous experience in this country,
Right.
constantly being told you can't, you can't, you can't, you only
Right.
can if you are white.
Yes.
Then you can start to understand they think that way because they receive the opposite message.
Right.
We are dealing with what we are because of the messages we have been receiving, not just through our lives, but our parents and grandparents and great grandparents. And for some of us, I could trace back to a fourth great grandparent in this country.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So if those are the messages we've received, if that's the programming we've received, if that's everything that's in the textbooks that we have been learning from, it is, I don't want to use the word normal, but normal is subjective. And so in their world,
it's normalized.
Yes, it has been normalized for them to feel and think and believe what they believe.
Yeah.
And we are fighting for a new normalization.
But here's the good news. Here's the good news, y'all.
Give us some good news. And I got one more question for you.
We have a whole generation of people coming up now. Their first memory of what a president actually is
a black man.
Black man.
Yes.
That gives me hope.
Yes. It gives
And
me
now,
hope.
so that makes it easy for when a black woman comes to the state. Oh, wait.
Yes.
This is possible. This isn't foreign to me. This isn't something from Mars. This is doable.
Right. Right.
That's the good news. That's the good news.
That is the good news. That is the good news. My last question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
I give it to every guest. Angela Davis said, I am changing the things I cannot accept. Mm-hmm. Changing the things I cannot accept. So what is that something that you cannot accept? And then how can people who are listening to this help support change in that area?
I cannot accept African-American people tearing each other down unnecessarily. And so, when I learn from the students, neighbors, parents, colleagues, whomever, I try to help them understand that the African-American experience is a fragmented one, is a diverse one. Even though we're one people, there's a lot of different paths and branches to that tree. And in order for us to achieve a goal as a group of people, we're going to have to be more tolerant of each other on an individual basis and work more in terms of educating one another than bringing each other down. If somebody is doing something to you or doing something in your community that you don't like, you don't run to the nearest media outlet and blast them. You call them in. You call them on the phone. Hey, bro, look, this is not cool. And this is why I think it's not cool. Now, you can have our own feelings, but when we come out of this conversation, we're coming out as colleagues, not necessarily friends. We're coming out as people who have mutual respect for each other in our dealings with other folks. Because that is what, at this point in our development, this is just Eugene talking. I can't speak for anybody else. But at this point in our development as African Americans, that's what it's going to take. When I see Black men on social media
now
speaking ill of Kamala Harris for silly reasons, for things like because they don't think she could stand up to the difficulties or the pressures of being president, or because she's not quote unquote Black enough. These are the men that I have to pull aside and say, my brother, you obviously don't know America's history. If you got a drop in you, you Black.
Yeah.
According to the greater United States community, that's what you are.
Yep. And the law in many states still.
It's still
many states still.
And if any of you who don't think that you are, you will find out at some point in your life. My favorite comedian, Paul Mooney, has something called and I won't use the word, but the Negro wake-up call. I'll replace the word.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And we all get it, whether we live in inner city Baltimore or whether we live in suburban Prince George's County, Maryland, or whether we live in rural Orange, Virginia, at some point in our lives, if you live long enough, because of the country you live in and the history of the country you live in, you will get your Negro wake-up call.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. Yes, you will.
That's what I cannot tolerate and what I try to combat, not in a mean way, but in a caring way and intelligent way every chance that I get.
Well, I want to say thank you for doing that. As a Black woman in America, thank you for standing up for us.
First of all, I have listen. Where would I be without one? My mama is one. Yes. My wife is one. My daughter is one. If I can't stand up for them, what is my usefulness and relevance on this earthly plane?
Yeah, what did Tupac say?
I was never a big fan of Tupac, so you can go ahead and help me with that one. No,
we all came from a woman. You came from a woman.
Well, yes. Okay, yes, I remember that. But just one example of the different paths. You know, a lot of people love Tupac. Mm-hmm. I never saw it, but I appreciate his message to the Black community when he was not rapping. But lyrically, I never really got it. But that's okay.
That's okay. It's okay. You know, it's like I was busy with things like being a single mom at that point in time, so I didn't listen to a lot of it. But I did have a colleague who was using his music, the literature that was in his music, to teach literature and experience. And so that's where
I had a young teacher that was doing the same thing when I was an administrator, and said as long as it works and the kids love it and get the points of it, use what you got to use.
Yeah. Eugene, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad. Yes, wonderful conversation. Equity warriors out there, I want us to commit to something. A couple of things. One, I want you to text this episode. Text it to a parent, a caregiver, somebody else in your community, a teacher, a principal, somebody. And then commit to taking action in our schools and in our communities. There were many insights shared today, and you can use those to help advocate for equitable educational opportunities for all students. Engage with your teachers, parents, caregivers, students. We can all work together to create inclusive environments that foster success for every child. So remember, text it. Don't just like it. I love it if you like it. Don't just like it. Text it to somebody. Spread awareness and help inspire others to join this fight for educational equity. And to steal somebody else's line we've been talking about for just a minute here, because when we fight, we win.
Yes, we
right?
do. We do.
And then join me again next episode. If you've got a question, a comment, something you'd like to have covered, a special request, a guest that you think should be on this show. There is a link down there to text me directly. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your stories. And remember, don't worry about things you cannot change. Change the things you can no longer accept. I'll see you next time. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the 3E Podcast. Now, here's how you can make a real difference. First, smash that subscribe button. It's free. It's easy. Just do it. Second, share the show with anyone you know who cares about education. And third, consider becoming a supporter of the show. Together, we're not just talking about change, we're making it happen. Make a donation today to be part of that mission and change, and I'll catch you next time.